So while we wait, before we get started, I'm going to do a little housekeeping. Thank you for sharing your time with us during your valuable lunch hour. Feel free to turn off your camera if you want to eat. And quick reminder, please mute your mics. I believe we already did that on our end, but please mute your mics. We'll have a little session on question and answers once we get done with this. Again, thank you very much for joining us during this noon webinar on our little recap of what's going on with this. We'll wait one more minute before we get started. If people that are logged in could put in the chat your name and the organization or who you're affiliated with in the chat, be super grateful. Let's us keep tabs on who all made it. So, thank you all once again. My name is Carlos Morales. I'm the Transportation and Data Manager over at MAPA. I'm just going to do a quick introduction of myself and the team that's working on this, and then we'll get started. We are overseeing this climate pollution reduction planning grant. We'll talk in greater detail in just a bit. I'm going to kick it off to Lindsay, who's helping us out. Let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Button. I'm a transportation planner with MAPA. You get over to Grant, yes.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Excuse me. My name is Grant Anderson. I'm the Community and Economic Development Manager here at MAPA.
And rounding out the MAPA team, my name is Laura Heilman. I am Communications and Outreach Manager.
Excellent. So we'll get started. So hopefully you're still here for the Climate Pollution Reduction Planning Grant. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of news stories in the media right now about some of the EPA grants and some of the mega projects released throughout the US, which is great. And this is kind of a subset of some of the work that we're doing. So let's get into it. A little bit of background. There are two phases to this program. Phase one is the planning grant awards. These were disbursed by the EPA to the state of Nebraska. So there is a statewide plan to look at climate pollution reduction. And there is the city of Omaha was the lead agency for our MSA region. The city is also pursuing their own climate pollution action grant that specifically deals with the city of Omaha and the city of Omaha boundaries. What is the difference? We are doing the Greater Omaha CPRG. What we're doing is communicating and expanding some of the work that's been taking place with the city of Omaha to the larger 8-county region within the metropolitan statistical area. Getting back to what this grant is all about, there are three main deliverables. It's a planning grant. The first part was developing an inventory of carbon pollution within or greenhouse gas emissions within the boundary of the MSA. The first action plan really concentrated on priority actions that we could take. And then what we're working on now is what is called the Comprehensive Climate Action Plan, the CCAP. That is kind of additional work. It's refining what we did in the PCAP and filling in the data gaps and information gaps that we may have missed on the first round and making it more comprehensive. Finally, after that, we have a reporting period. How are we doing about 2-3 years from now to report back to the EPA about some of the changes and things that have occurred. Okay, next slide. So getting into what is the Greater Omaha CPRG? The Greater Omaha CPRG is represented by this larger scope, the larger geographic scope. We have the counties of Washington, Douglas, Sarpy, Cass, and Saunders over in the Nebraska side, but also looking at the Harrison, Potawatomi, and Mills County. So a total of 8 counties are represented. Majority of the information and data that you will see later on in this presentation is for either the aggregate for the entire region, right? So when we present numbers, data and information, and we say, here's our carbon or the greenhouse emissions for the greater Omaha region, it's an aggregation of all the county data. All the data that exists is the best available data that we could collect. Most of the time that data is represented strictly at the county level. So a lot of the data you'll see today is county level data that we were able to collect. We did not drill down to the city level, as that is not the focus. We're looking at the greater Omaha at the county level. Certain emission sources are not available at a disaggregate level of a citywide level. That's why we kind of tend to go with the county level. All right, so we talked a little bit about the deliverables. Here's a little bit more refined timeline. Our PCAP was due and submitted in March to the EPA. Thanks to the city of Omaha and MAPA, we worked together and put our priority climate action plan together and delivered it to the EPA. At this point, what we're doing is refining the data and information. If we didn't have any data sources, we're trying to fill those data sources. And 2, we're refining some of these strategies that we'll present in a little bit. We're also outreaching and engaging different community members throughout the greater MSA region. One of the things that I need to remind everyone, these are voluntary measures, right? We're putting forward a plan in order for local community members and local counties and local departments throughout the region to be able to adopt and say, hey, we have a plan for that. We have a greenhouse emission reduction grant. And so when funding opportunities from the EPA come out that say, do you have a PCAP or a CCAP? Local communities could check off that little box in the application in the NOFO and be able to apply. So a little bit more about the strategy. What we're trying to do is implement broad stroke strategies that are not drilled down to local communities. We're not dictating to communities what they should do. We're merely presenting some of the goals and targets to help us meet these climate goals, and providing additional strategies and information so that people can apply for the funding. That's really the key thing that we're really trying to hone in on. We're trying to help local communities access and understand additional funding sources that might help them fulfill some of their wishes, dreams, and desires to reduce greenhouse gases. So we're doing this outreach data through, that should say February 2025. We're not going back in time. I apologize for that. The final plan is due in the fall 2025 to the EPA. And we'll have a lot of different talking sessions about this in the coming months. So hopefully you'll get to see me and our MAPA team in different areas, locations, and we'll be able to talk about this in more detail. So the purpose of today's webinar is really to do a recap or understand what we submitted to the EPA so that we have a base understanding of what it is and what it isn't. Greenhouse gases, I'm going to take a couple seconds to go into some of the details. What we're really looking for is carbon dioxide, usually found in combustion and fossil fuels. Methane, CH4, usually coming from landfills, oil, gas operations, manure, cattle, etc. Nitrous oxide, fossil fuel combustion, nitrogen fertilizers, and in other industrial gases containing fluorine, right? Those are what constitutes the greenhouse gases, the things that we're trying to measure. And we'll get into a little bit more of the measurement in a couple slides, I believe. The way the inventory is broken down is into these 6 sectors. We call them greenhouse inventory sectors. You might hear them by a couple names, different times. We might use strategies, et cetera, et cetera. But for the most part, when we say the greenhouse gas inventory for stationary buildings, we are trying to represent data and information housed at the residential, so local residential, that's whether it's single family, multifamily, et cetera, it's just residential, commercial, and industrial. And honestly, a lot of this stuff is dependent on what the data sources are able to provide. Oftentimes, these three have been mixed. Sometimes in our from our energy providers, they provide us either residential or commercial, and that constitutes the available data that we have. Mobile transportation, obviously, that's vehicles, whether they're small vehicles, commercial vehicles, or fleet vehicles. This is some of the information that we try to capture. Agriculture and land management, a lot of this data came from statewide sources with regards to nitrogen consumption, so fertilizer consumption. We were able to take that and disaggregate to the county levels. Finally, waste production, the generation of waste. This was one issue that was brought up by some of our partners that they wanted us to focus on. So in the slide, you'll see a little distinction. Hopefully you can see the color distinction. The top 4, the ones that are colored green, are the ones that we provided in our priority climate action plan, where we spelled out additional details. The electricity, water consumption, and forestry, there were significant data gaps when we had to report the PCAP, and therefore we did not submit them in our priority climate plan, but hope to do so, not hope, we will represent more data and information on that when it comes to the comprehensive plan. So here's how the breakdown of of greenhouse gases. When we report all this information, we try to report it in metric tons of CO2 by sector. This bar graph kind of shows the total emissions, metric tons of CO2 by sector and by state. So we grouped all the counties in Nebraska and all the counties in Iowa, and this is what it shows. Obviously, the 3 largest within our region were electricity consumption. Think about the generation of electricity, mobile combustion vehicles out on our roadways, and then stationary combustion, residential, commercial buildings, right? Those are the 3 largest emitting sources within our region. Breakdown as a percent, same information, aggregated for the entire MSA. So this is how it breaks down for the entirety of the MSA. Nearly over 50% really comes from electricity, mobile combustion. If we add in stationary combustion, it's 75% of our greenhouse gases are coming from those sources. So it's pretty important for us to hone in on those largest sources for us to make a dent on some of this stuff. Solid waste is a small sliver. I think it represents less than 3% of the total, if I'm doing math correctly. But this is where we're at. We then broke down the total emissions on a per county basis. Not a big surprise. The counties that have the most density or the most population tend to have the largest total emissions. It shouldn't be too big of a surprise. The most locations with the most activity, with the most residential, with the most commercial areas would have the highest levels of emissions. Not a big surprise here. The orange ones represent Nebraska counties, the blue ones represent Iowa counties. So obviously within Douglas County is the city of Omaha, followed by Sarpy. And on the Iowa side, we have Potawatomi County as some of the largest emitters or emissions of total CO2, metric tons of CO2 in that county. So what are the components? So as part of the priority action plan, we were working with local community members, local groups, City of Omaha, and a lot of different partners to try to figure out what are some ways we could tackle or reduce these emissions. And we really looked at some specific sectors that we have known interventions and we know other work has been done or is going to take place in this area. For the transportation sector, we're really looking at something that's regional, replicable, and something that other local communities could take hold of. Obviously, we had a lot of inspiration from the City of Omaha and their work, but talking through and looking at it, the three main ones are mobile transportation and how to adapt multimodal networks. On stationary, the focus is really looking at priority measures that increase solar, increase weatherization, so increase the efficiency of existing and new buildings, whether they're residential or commercial. Again, energy efficiency upgrades and zoning ordinances to allow for solar, right? Solar is going to be a part of this mix that we're going to have to figure out. Finally, in waste reduction, one of the biggest components in that is how do we reduce the organics going into the landfill that produce these methane gases. That is kind of one of the bigger arching strategies. And let's get into more detail. So within stationary combustion, it's about 22% of the total greenhouse gases for the entire MSA region. And our priority strategy is to improve energy efficiency across all sectors and develop alternative and renewable energy options across all sectors. So this includes both residential and commercial. So some of the strategies or actions that people could take include increasing energy conservation efforts, right? And really with a focus on our LIDAC communities. LIDAC represents low income, disadvantage. What's the AC? That will come back to me, or Lindsay, if you could remind me.
C is definitely communities. I think it's just low income.
Yeah. So with a focus on harnessing the power of incentivizing, expanding these rebate options and doing weatherization projects to those that have been in most need, right? Within our community. So part of the work that we've done in terms of mapping, we have additional maps showing where the LIDAC communities are within our greater MSA region. And this strategy is looking at how do we enhance these weatherization or these rebate programs and really target and hone in on some of these older neighborhoods that could use or benefit the most from such rebates. So that's kind of an overarching action. Increasing training availability and opportunities for renewable energy systems and weatherization. Again, thinking through about, so if we have these rebates, do we have the workforce behind it to help implement and do these things? Part of our strategy and our broad stroke strategy is we're realizing that many different agencies, communities, etc., have different rebate programs or different weatherization programs, but they're accounting for a small percentage of funding. What does that look like at the greater level? Is there a way to pull some of these funds and make more efficient use of these funds? These are conversations we'd love to have into the future, but this is a starting point. Next up is mobile combustion. Again, this represents almost 30%, 28% of our total greenhouse gas emissions within the region. Our biggest strategy here is how do we reduce the vehicle miles of travel? So in order to get this emissions from the current pool of vehicles, we did take a look at vehicle miles traveled per county and then multiplied by the local component of how far and what the vehicle mix is. These data sources were provided by the state and the EPA, and that's how we came up with these numbers. One way to reduce that, a couple ways to reduce that. Our priority actions for this are, one, to increase alternative transportation or multimodal transportation. This includes enhancing, increasing, or expanding your bicycle networks and connections, enhancing, increasing pedestrian networks, making sure that schools, churches, etc., are well connected and served by walking or biking. And finally, if you have access transit within your local community, enhancing those services to reduce the total VMT and increase access to a lot more people. The second part of this action is really developing transportation demand management. So how do we, as a community, as a region, travel to get to work, to get to school? Post-pandemic, one of the things that we've seen in the transportation field is a greater increase in the number of people working from home, which really does help reduce some of these VMTs. So great. How do we enhance and expand that? There are a lot of people that could either carpool, so share one car to many people, so maximize the efficiency of each vehicle that's out there. Take transit, find transit access. Van pools are also availability within there. Finally, there's this action about increasing adoption of electrification. So how do we electrify or incentivize the electrification of our transportation system, whether it's the fleet and the local resources of their fleet vehicles and the mix of the vehicles that they have. So instead of putting a purchase order for fleet vehicle replacements that are gas-based, maybe they start transitioning to an electric fleet vehicle. And how that works and the transitions and necessary modifications that they would have to do to their building in order to have that happen. The other aspect behind this is really looking at public charging stations, right? There's this range anxiety that exists amongst EV users. So how do we ease some of that burden and spread out some of these kind of local economic development tools as well? Next is solid waste. Again, this represents 1% of the total greenhouse gases within the region. Overall, what we're looking to do as a region is to reduce the total waste across the entire MSA. What does this mean? Diversion and reduction of organic waste. How do we go about doing that? There's a lot of things that I, as a transportation professional, am not very well versed in waste. But it's been great to talk to our friends over at Douglas County and Kent Holmes over at Douglas County to learn a whole lot more about what this entails. Finally, we have agriculture and land management. So this represents about 9% of our total greenhouse gas. The main reason we prioritize this sector in this Priority Climate Action Plan, the PCAP, was at the time we were developing the PCAP, the EPA had announced their phase 2 round of funding, the implementation funding. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a broad set of options that both aligned with City of Omaha and some of the state priorities. And so this was one of the ones that was included. A lot of the strategies here are focused on the preservation of land within the MSA. So what does that mean? Looking at smart agricultural practices. These were kind of borrowed a little from the state of Nebraska plan. Expanding urban greening projects, including tree canopy, urban agriculture, native species. And I think we also went into a little bit more details about increasing density, right? The closer you are to your work location, the less you're likely to travel, and therefore reducing two big things, reducing this expansion of land and which increases your VMTs. How do we reduce that? How do we enhance that? So that's in general, what we presented and provided as part of our PCAP, our goal and our assignment in the next several months is to refine those key strategies and put smart information behind them, right? So how much do we want to reduce BMT within our total MSA level? What does that look like? What does that give us? How do we get to something that reduces our VMTs within the given framework of 2050 horizon? So this is kind of looking at what was previously done as part of our PCAP and the work that remains to be done as part of our CCAP. Thanks to our friends at the EPA that continue to give us guidance, information, and webinars on what is next. The light blue colors are things that we were doing and incorporated within our PCAP. The darker blue are things that we have to include in our comprehensive climate action plan, which includes how do we leverage federal funds for some of these actions and activities? How do we produce greenhouse targets for these strategies that we're looking at by sector? What are some of the greenhouse gas projections? So we will have a business as usual case. If nothing were to change, this is what it looks like. And then on top of that, adding what the trend line would be if some of these strategies are implemented. And doing additional workforce analysis. Do we have the right people and workforce in place to accommodate the new electrification of whether it's the automobile industry, whether it's the HVAC installers, installing new systems in homes or retrofitting in homes, solar panel, et cetera, et cetera. So those are great conversations that we're looking forward to have with the larger community and understanding a whole lot more. And so here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to refine our sectors, including our strategies and actions, enhance and reflect our guidance from the city of Omaha and deliver measurable outcomes. So at this point, we are trying to align some of the work, a lot of the work that the city of Omaha has put into their climate action plan, climate and resiliency action plan. I apologize for the names. And align what we're doing at the larger metro region with some of the work that's already taking place within the city of Omaha. Why are we doing this? One of the big things, and I'll hopefully refer back to where the emission sources were coming from. As you might remember, when we did the county breakdown, the largest emitting source was Douglas County, represented by the city of Omaha. So we take advantage and align some of these strategies and align some of the work, we could reach multiple times of emissions reductions by focusing and harnessing some of the work that's done at the city of Omaha level and expanding throughout our region. Finally, we're here to listen. So this is the start, and thank you for joining us on this noon webinar, which will be recorded. And we're hoping to listen and gain additional feedback, information. Some of these strategies might need a little refinement. How could we refine them? Some actions are already being taken on by local communities. Let us know. We want to know how we and this plan can help you leverage future federal funds. And I think with that, I'll open it up for questions. Thank you very much. If you have specific questions that you don't feel like sharing in this webinar, feel free to send us an email at cprg@mapacog.org. Again, that email address is open 24/7. So if something comes up after we're done here today, feel free to email that. For additional information like this webinar, if you want to recap on it or you need to rewind and see some of the information, feel free to go to our website and now I'll open it up for discussion, questions, or anything that comes to mind.
Hey, Carlos, I'll ask you a question. Thanks for the review there. And I think you're right. It is very consistent with my understanding of the city of Omaha's plan at this juncture, which sounds like it's a little bit further ahead of the MAPA regional plan, just in terms of, we've released that final draft and we're hoping to get that adopted, I think, through planning board in October and city council by the end of the year. But it does appear very consistent with where you are in terms of findings, which makes sense given your observation about the city, having a major impact in what we're trying to address here in the area. My question is, are you aware of upcoming federal grant opportunities? The city's gearing up for that with additional funding from the EPA to start implementation projects as soon as possible. And I didn't know if you're a part of that or if there's also a regional component to that.
Yeah, we're keeping abreast of this. I think our big role is having this regional plan, kind of the checklist, right? As part of usual NOFOs or notice of funding opportunities, there's usually a little check or a little question that says, do you have a climate action plan in your local community? We're hoping that by taking part of this effort, this covers all the communities within the MSA region. So a good example would be if the city of Valley wished to entertain or go after additional EPA funding for an implementation, let's say it's vehicle chargers, right? That's a hot thing. They would be able to do so and cite this as a reference. Look, it's within the Greater Omaha Climate Action Plan, and one of the actions is to electrify. They could use that language that we put forward and use it to substantiate their application. As a region, I don't think we've gone forward with implementation funding just yet. MAPA's role is not really into the implementation side. We leave that to the locals that own the systems, the ordinances, and have the responsibility to maintain and do all that fun stuff. But we are very happy to support, collaborate, and bring different resources together. If there is a need to get a conversation with multiple groups, we're happy to play host and bring multiple groups and people together, right? A lot of these EPA grants are looking for big regional investments. So if it was a Douglas, Sarpy County, and OPPD application for a big solar project, for example, hey, we might be able to collaborate, talk through what this means and implies, and be backed up by this climate action plan for the Greater Omaha region, and really fare better than someone that's not.
Yep. Okay, I got it. And then would you anticipate any interaction with the state too? They were just awarded a major $300 million EPA grant, right?
Yep. We are working with the state. We work pretty close with the state. We have quarterly check-ins with them to see how they're doing. Some of the agriculture information that we included in our PCAP really aligns with what the state's doing and some of the state strategies. And again, that was intentional to allow a broader swath of funding to be eligible within our region.
Yeah. So I would think our region could qualify for some of that state funding, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And if we need to get the state and some of the local players involved in the ag sector for this, maybe that's a call we can have.
Okay. Thanks.
Say, Carlos, this is Mark Higgins. thinking, well, recently, OPPD, and those folks could probably speak to it, but they are launching some pilot programs for community outreach or education on available funding. And this is, I think, more on a homeowner type level. Any thoughts of doing that with Mid-America across the river?
Yeah,
They have
we have
various rebates.
yeah, we have, by we, I'm using a royal we for me. But we do have this interesting idea of bringing all our energy providers together in the room with our local and municipal agents and talk about this idea of how we're leveraging existing rebates and future to come rebates, right? So trying to figure out what's the need, what's the gap in funding that we need to fill, and how best to actuate and get that done, right? I think that's a worthwhile conversation that we're looking forward to do and have. It's a very grand idea, I have to say. It might be a little audacious to an extent, but I think it'd be very worthwhile to get all the energy providers, municipalities, and county governments together to really understand and get a sense of how we can best leverage future funding opportunities and how to best implement. How do we get to that implementation level? And I understand it's going to take quite a bit of work. And so we're looking to start that conversation.
Yeah, a number of the smaller communities and your special purpose members, they may not be aware of the direct pay option for tax credits. So those are things you don't have to apply for.
Yeah.
You have to just undertake, which is, a big deal too. I'm not minimizing that, but are they aware of things that are available right now in that
Right.
regard?
And there is so much out there, right? From the Inflation Reduction Act, there are quite a bit of federal incentives for local homeowners. There are quite a bit of restrictions to that as well. So learning to understand, navigate federal language and legalese is daunting, I would say. But if we all come together and have a shared understanding, I think that would do quite a bit within our region as well.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any additional questions before we wrap it up for today? Because if not, you can always reach out to us at our CPRG@mapacog.org email address to kind of follow up if you want more information, or if you have thoughts that might occur to you later this afternoon. If you want to reach out for those, then that's the email address to use. This webinar, we're going to make sure it gets up on our YouTube channel so that we can reference it and have people, have someone who wasn't able to make it, they can check it out, the recording after the fact. And keep an eye out for future outreach efforts. We'll be coming to each of the counties in October-ish to try and do a jurisdiction meeting kind of with leaders within each county to discuss county-specific measures that might want to be included in the plan. And we're also going to be looking to schedule some sector workshops. So reaching out to experts within each of those emission sectors to get feedback and input from those groups. So keep an eye out for future efforts. And if there's no more questions, I think, Carlos, we can probably wrap it up.
Yeah, once again, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. We're always open, always available through our email. And I think our executive director likes to say, like and subscribe. Let other people know that this webinar took place. We try to launch a wide net to be as inclusive as possible, but people's schedules often conflict. If you know or hear of anything, please, please, please either let them know that we're here, we're working on this, or B, send them to this webinar where they could get a little bit more information. Again, thank you very much. Thanks for sharing your time. We appreciate it, and more to come. Thank you very much.